And it's like that thing that as it's coming out of your mouth, you want to pull it back and you just can't because it's too late. And it was basically a wound that you may not have even known you were carrying. You may not have even had the awareness around that person presses on it.
The problem that really starts to happen in relationship is we start seeing our partner as the source of danger. And the more that trigger happens, I start to build this narrative that my partner is the source of my lack of safety.
If you've ever wondered why tiny fights turn into emotional earthquakes, or why you and your partner keep having the same argument in different outfits, this conversation is for you.
Today, we're breaking down triggers, attachment patterns, and that anxious avoidant dance that so many high-functioning couples get stuck in, and how to start rewriting it together instead of turning on each other.
I'm Emily Goff, a relationship coach. I've spent years exploring how we connect to grow and heal in love.
And I'm Kelly Gardner, an embodied leadership coach and communications consultant. Love isn't theory, it's practice.
This is Love in Practice.
Let's grow this.
Welcome back to episode 4 of Love in Practice. I'm Kelly Gardner. This is my lovely wife, Emily Goff. We are 2 practicing relationship coaches, and we are going to be opening up our journey together with you as a couple, how challenging it has been and how rewarding it continues to be each and every day. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the things that we carry with us into relationship. Bag lady, you gon' lift your...
I had no idea you were going to start singing on this podcast.
all that baggage that we carry. And, it was really interesting because in the last episode, we got to see some of our early work together when we so beautifully thought we had it all figured out. But we were just progressing along so well because we were so aware of the challenges that we were bringing into this relationship.
And for where we were very aware.
Absolutely.
Like I give baby us credit for that, but
baby us has T-Rex arms.
Basically. It's adorable.
I call Emily my baby tiger. She gets mad. It's like,
it's true. He laughs at me when I get angry.
Paper tiger. But one of the things that we were very much aware of at that time was the patterns that we had established in previous relationships
Yes.
and how we were holding each other or how we could potentially be holding each other to some of the expectations or fears that we had brought into our relationship and really working through that and patterns that showed up in that. And the beauty of how those patterns were just being thrown in our face right at the very beginning.
And we did get into, a lot of that in the last episode. So if you skipped episode 3, I recommend going back and checking that out first.
Checking us out back when we were young and fully in love. Well, we're fully in love.
Oh yeah, we're still fully in love. That hasn't changed.
But just in that chemical cocktail of love.
Yes.
And just, we all have it figured out. And now we're getting into some of the deeper stuff.
Yeah.
And we touched on this in episode 2 as we really kind of talked about how there are deeper patterns that we are starting to recognize now in this second stage of relationship where, oftentimes in that first stage, it's like, there is nothing in the world wrong with you. Your shit smells like roses.
Every single green flag.
Oh, every single green flag.
All the green flags.
Right? The red flags just look yellow. They're
Beige
rosy at best, And then in stage 2, even the green flags look like caution flags. It's
so
like,
sad, but so true.
It's like the checker flag comes out and you're like, 10 more laps to go. Like, what happened? And I think this is really common, that so many couples go through it and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about this phase where everything starts to turn upside down and we start to really question whether or not, this is actually the person that we wanted to be with. And the thing that we want you to know is this is normal. And this is oftentimes where people start going, maybe I shouldn't be in this.
Yeah. Become disillusioned and think that the grass is greener and that there's this, we kind of mentioned this on episode 2, I believe. There must be this other person out there. This is too hard. There must be this other person out there. And I think it's also really indicative of, I've talked about this for a while, a very individualistic culture that we are part of. And I'm all for doing your own work. I am the first one to say each person needs to do their own work, to do their own shit. But there is a relational element of it that is missing because you also still need to do the work together. And if you're single, even, you still do the work by being in relationship, not necessarily romantic relationship, but just in relationship platonically even with other humans. That is how we get to know ourselves on deeper levels, where we start to see some of those patterns that come out. Now, we get into a romantic relationship, and that is the closest mirror, and that will trigger our deepest wounds, which is also why it can be the most painful by far. It can also be the most rewarding. But you really have to be willing to move through that stage.
Let's talk about some common words here, because you just used one that's really important. I want to make sure that we're clear on this. Trigger. Do tell.
Trigger is that moment when your nervous system gets activated. And how do you know? How do I count the ways? You often will have a very fast reaction as opposed to a response that you almost can't stop. And sometimes you're almost aware of it at the last second as that reaction is coming out and like exploding out at whoever you are engaging with. And it's like that thing that as it's coming out of your mouth, you want to pull it back and you just can't because it's too late. And it was basically a wound that you may not have even known you were carrying. You may not have even had the awareness around that person presses on it very unconsciously most of the time. Usually they are completely oblivious to the fact that they're pressing on anything. And it could be something that is buried so deep into your subconscious from childhood, things that you may not even have in your conscious memory. And then it also creates a lot of confusion for you when that's pressed, because it's like, why am I behaving this way? Why am I so angry or sad or pissed off or confused? Whatever that is, that really gets activated. And that is where a lot of things go wrong.
It's interesting because I used to think about this as, the trigger is triggering a core wound or trauma that I had in my past. And the more I continue to experience and work with it, the more that I'm realizing, we say this often, is that when we're working relationships, we're often working on parenting, because it's really about is the adult here or is the child here? And what I'm really starting to realize is that word trigger is not about so much triggering the old wound or the trauma as much as it is triggering the response of the adaptive child, right? This idea that, I often refer to it in working with men as our loyal soldier, right? This protective part of ourselves. And internal family systems, there's different levels of protectors that come in that are at play when I'm triggered. And what it's doing is it's triggering that protector who's going, I am in danger for whatever reason. And more oftentimes than not, it isn't actually the danger that we're really experiencing right here in this space, but it's triggering a message of I'm in danger and triggering the action of that adaptive part of myself that has learned how to keep me safe in an unsafe world. And that loyal soldier, that protector part of me has been keeping me safe for a really long time. And so when I'm triggered, that's the part of me that's coming online. It's going, danger, Will Robinson, I need to keep you safe. That part jumps in and stops the bus of whatever danger it perceives. The problem that really starts to happen in relationship is we start seeing our partner as the source of danger.
Yes.
As that thing that is keeping us unsafe. And the more that trigger happens, the more I start to build this narrative that my partner is the source of my lack of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we'll reference couples therapist Terry Real several times over the course of this podcast, because we have learned so much from him. And I have learned a lot from many teachers, but I really resonate with his work the deepest.
When it comes to relationship, he is the OG.
He really is. He's amazing. He's amazing. And he talks a lot about blaming the pattern as opposed to the partner. And I think that that's a really important differentiation, because to your point, when we start to build that narrative, we're compiling evidence. Like every time we felt unsafe when our partner triggered us, that becomes about the partner. So I'm no longer not safe in this pattern or this relationship because I'm not safe with you as my partner. And that creates such distance and armoring that it's really hard to then bridge that gap. And it doesn't leave space for vulnerability, because why am I going to show you my soft underbelly if I feel unsafe with you? And then we stop sharing quite as much. And this is almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts, because it happens a little bit over time. Sure, sometimes we'll have the more explosive types of conflicts, but other times it's a little tiny moment of connection that was missed. Because I could have shared something with you and I thought, nope, not going to do that. Doesn't feel safe. And enough of those pile up, and it doesn't take as long as you might think. Some people it might take 20 years. For other people, it might take 2 years, depending on how much depth you are seeking in a relationship and how much tolerance you have for a lack of. And that's going to create a really big earthquake that you may not be able to come back from if you allow it to go on.
Yeah. Little earthquakes and big earthquakes, right? There's tension in every relationship. And for those who regularly address that tension, there's a release valve, and those little earthquakes get to happen on a regular basis. And the more skilled we get at just bringing these things up, the tensions, the disagreements, the conflicts, however small or large they may be, the more skilled we get at basically taking off the release valve, the smaller those little tremors become. But when those don't get addressed, they go unspoken, unanswered, they continue to build. It's just like that pressure building in an earthquake, and you're going to have a really big one. And oftentimes when those big earthquakes come, we're not prepared for them. And they shake the foundation and they rip the walls down because everything was good. Everything was good in this relationship. There was no fighting. There was no tension. There was no, there was some little things here and there, but it wasn't worth fighting about. And then it does come, and it's very difficult. And so building that rapport and building that ability to talk about these things. So let's talk about some of these things.
Well, and yes. And the other thing I just want to add to that is that what I continue to learn, especially in this relationship, is that conflict is actually an opportunity. And I learned that very early on in this relationship, that it's, even though sometimes it would and sometimes still feels like my nervous system is on fire during, I very consciously recognize it for the opportunity that it is, because there is so much depth and trust that gets to be built, and safety in the moments of repairing from that conflict. Now, if you have conflict and you don't repair, and you don't repair fully, that is going to continue to compound under the resentment ledger of the relationship. But if you actually learn how to repair, and these are really important skills to navigate, then you actually get to create more of the relationship that you want to move through this phase and every other time in this relationship or any other where this phase comes up.
Yeah. And I think I'm just going to put a pin in that because I think we want to come back to our next episode talking about some of the winning strategies and losing strategies and how these kind of play out in relationship. But I wanted to kind of get at the core root. And, you know, when we're working with a couple, one of the first things that we want to kind of assess is looking at how are they the individually oriented towards relationally oriented towards others. How do they tend to show up in relationships? And that's kind of the first piece that we want to kind of figure out. And then once we can kind of figure out how they individually orient towards others, then we can see, oh, these two pairings are going to work out this way. And it's pretty obvious. And so talk a little bit about that first analysis that we do and kind of looking at the orientation, and maybe you want to share a little bit of yours.
Well, it's all about spotting patterns. That's ultimately, that is the work that I do. That is the work that you do. That's the work that we do together with couples is what are the patterns? Because if you can spot the patterns, then you can change them. If you don't have awareness of the patterns, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't change what you don't know about.
Yeah.
So
behavioral patterns. Right?
Yeah, behavioral patterns. Exactly. So because underneath those patterns are stories, beliefs, trauma, experiences that we have held and created our entire lives around. We have built our foundational sense of self on these potentially very unstable stories. We think they're stable because we don't know anything else, but they can actually be quite unstable and really color the view and perspective that we have of the world, and ultimately filter it down to the view that we have of ourselves and the view that we have of our partners. And some of the things that we will initially just kind of assess with our couples are asking each of them separately. We have an intake form that they fill out separately, and we ask them to not talk to each other about the assessment form that they are filling out.
It's more than just a form now.
Yes.
We've got AI working on our behalf here, doing a full analysis of them. But as what are we really looking at?
We're really looking at when those triggers come up. What is your default response ultimately? And you may not fully know sometimes until the information is compiled and someone like us can boil it down and go, oh, this is kind of the underlying key piece. Everything else is a symptom of what this particular pattern is that's playing out.
And so two main orientations we look at, right? One being how they either move towards or move away.
Also known as, more anxiously attached or more avoidantly attached. There are a variety of labels that these things are given. I don't like attaching too much to any particular label because each one is a spectrum. But then there's also the sort of one up and one down.
Yeah.
And it can also, again, Terry Real kind of refers to it as like grandiosity, sort of the one up, and shame is more the one down. And typically almost every relationship has some version of one and some version of the other.
Polarity, where we tend to be drawn
polarity
towards the opposite.
Yes.
It's very rare that two people pursue and they keep pursuing each other. Typically, one person's going to be the pursuer, the other person is going to run away.
Yeah.
And then that person might turn around and run back, and then the other person goes, no, I want to run away
That's
now.
where it can shift.
Right? Yes, it can certainly shift. But there's a core orientation, and oftentimes this is labeled as anxious attachment style. Versus a avoidant, but there can also be disorganized, where you can be a little bit of both, and really we're striving for secure attachment, and that comes back to how these concepts actually developed in how we relate to our parents and how we are actually building that attachment in our early childhood development. And now applied to relational, you can now see how we're playing these things out. But talk a little bit about that orientation, just starting with the pursuer, the distancer, whichever language you want to. Why does that matter in relationship? Why is that one of the first things that we look at?
It really indicates how certain situations are going to play out. And you can predict with relative accuracy how this dance, this relational dance, is going to go down when you kind of figure out which role each person is playing. And if we start there and address that for each partner and for the relationship itself, then we get to work backwards and start to undo some of that, but rewrite a new story and retrain the nervous system to respond differently.
Yeah.
And there's also this idea that has been thrown around the personal growth world a huge amount. And I have often spouted this myself in terms of we all choose how we react. And that is true to a degree, but in a lot of ways, I actually no longer think that that is as true as I once did, because our nervous system is just reacting.
Yeah, well, I think it's safe to say that I can choose to react when I'm in my mature adult.
Yes. Right? And as you start to learn how you are reacting in the unhealthy ways, then you can start to choose differently. But to just start throwing that at somebody about you get to choose how you react, if they haven't gotten to the underlying patterns that are underneath it, that's not going to, and then that's very easy to then just go into self-shaming spiral because you think that you just aren't able to do what everyone else seems to be able to do. This is not easy work, and you have to be able to get underneath that before you can start to more actively and consciously choose your reaction.
Yeah. So let's describe for the listeners, if those of you who aren't fully familiar, and it feels like at this day and age, everyone's hearing about these things. But let's talk a little bit about what some of the tendencies are in both camps, and where do we lie in these camps?
I think we might as well just skip to us.
Okay.
Like, why don't we just play it out for you?
Great.
Example of our relationship.
Let's get to the meat and potatoes. Go on, give it to me.
So I tend to lean a little bit more anxious. You tend to lean a little bit more avoidant.
How dare you say what I am? Speak for yourself, woman.
And I'm not going to continue to speak for you. I'm just giving the basics here. Okay. If I say one, it's likely that you are the other. So again, the polarity. And each of us have done an enormous amount of work. Each of us have come a long way in terms of becoming much more secure over many years. And when shit hits the fan, I still feel those tendencies start to come up in me. Now I have a lot more tools now than I ever had before. So I can talk myself through it much more capably than I ever could. But that initial sort of knee-jerk response, depending on what kind of a day I'm having, what kind of a conflict we're engaged in, can be pressed on much more than usual. Where does that stem from? I have a father who left when I was 15. My parents split up. He left. We didn't talk. We haven't spoken really again. We didn't speak again for many, 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 many years. Still do not have a relationship. And
you're speaking. We're working. We're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah, that's a topic for a different day. Yeah. Speaking is a very loose term, but even when he was there, even when he was there physically, he was never emotionally there.
Yeah. I think that's really important because a lot of people are going to be like, well, my dad was my dad didn't leave me. I didn't get locked up. I didn't have any we call it capital T traumas.
Yes.
I didn't have any big things that happened to me. So therefore I don't necessarily resonate with these, but there are a lot more
very subtle nuances. It can be such small little moments that are, again, stuck in your subconscious. And that's why I've actually started incorporating a significant amount of subconscious work into my coaching practice and into the work that we do with our clients as well, because I just really started to recognize that there's only so much you can do from the head. And there are so many defense mechanisms that can be built in and intellectualizing, and you and I are both the worst for that.
Hey, how dare you speak for me? I don't know what you're talking about. Stay on your side of the fence there, woman. What do you think? This is a relationship?
I think that I can safely say that both of us are guilty of that one. And I actually kind of wish that at least one of us wasn't, so that we could pull the other one out. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
But these are the defense mechanisms that get built in. And there have to be ways of accessing these other parts in a way where you still feel very safe and comfortable with yourself. And I have a very specific method that I use where you are in a fully autonomous position of guiding this, but it's a very gentle way of calling some of these things up and giving you the insights and connections that you need to be able to rework some of these patterns.
Yeah. What I really do love about that process is that, it can be very difficult to go back into these things. And,
Yes.
and oftentimes going back into some of these things can be re-traumatizing. And so, having that release valve in therapy, you talk about titrating the experience so that you can have a little bit of the experience and then come back and say, I'm still safe. Go back in the experience, have a little bit more experience. And through the guided work with a professional, you can get that kind of experience. But this, when you introduced me to it, was really beautiful in the way that you're able to kind of guide yourself through this experience.
Oh yeah, I do this with myself all the time, like almost every day. I have I was doing it this morning. I do a very specific practice. Like, again, I do all of this work myself because I need it. And I recognize that. And that's part of, the work that I get to do to take responsibility for myself and for my energy in this relationship. But it's important. It's really important to be covering these practices with yourself.
So getting back to the anxious piece, right? Anxious is there's an abandonment wound,
Yes.
right? There's this, and it can be big abandonment as in someone left me, but it also could be that someone that I sought love from wasn't really present with me. And I had to do X, Y, and Z. Like that, speaking Canadian for you guys, that's a Z for y'all.
I'm so proud.
I had to do all of these things in order to get the attention, the love that I wanted, and that wasn't necessarily there. That person might have been abandoning themselves. They might have been checking out either emotionally or physically. And so a lot of these things can lead to anxious behavior. But what's really interesting to me is that sometimes people can have the exact same experiences and respond to it in a not necessarily an anxious. You could have the exact same abandonment issue and expand and create grandiosity around it and create a sense of entitlement because I went above and beyond to get the love that I wanted. I became this other version of myself. And then I start to create this wall and distance myself and push people away, right? And so it's really interesting, I think, to get into where it came from for the value of finding compassion for myself.
Yes. And to that point, so, I know we're kind of taking different models here, and I almost want to give everyone a visual, but it's sort of this idea where the grandiosity is the one up. And
sorry, I mixed metaphors there.
Yes, that can be more associated with avoidant type of behavior, and the one down. They're not exactly equal, but generally speaking, for the sake of this, I think we can safely kind of categorize it similarly. And then the anxious, more anxious leaning can tend to be a little bit more one down, which is a bit more shame oriented. And I did not realize until the last year for sure, just how much shame I actually carry. And it's like lifting these internal rocks and finding more shame under there. And I'm like, where did you come from? And then realizing how often I sometimes show up from a place of fear and anxiety and shame, and how that spills onto you, gets projected onto our relationship, and is really unhealthy for both of us.
Yeah.
And something that I've started to really look at a lot more is the idea of containment. But I had started to I tended to think of containment as being more for things like anger. And I have started to really understand that these things like fear and anxiety and shame and all these things, they also need containment to be able to not spill that energy into a relationship or onto someone else.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about when you say containment, right? I think we're talking about boundaries, right?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. Tell us more.
Yeah. It's the idea of boundaries that keep me safe because I need to be protected in some ways. If I let every single thing that is said to me or comes at me, if I let that in, I'm incredibly porous. And I have struggled with that at times because I'm also very empathic. I am deeply affected by other people's emotions, but I have to create a healthy boundary where I can meet you in empathy, but not take on what's yours and isn't actually mine to hold and carry. And then there's also the boundaries that we hear about more often in terms of if someone does a particular behavior that doesn't work for me, I let them know. And a true boundary, by the way, is making it about me, not demanding that someone else change their behavior, but me letting them know and communicating what I am going to do if they continue to behave in a particular way. So if someone is yelling at me and that doesn't work for my nervous system, I get to let them know, hey, if you continue to do that, I'm going to need to step away until we can have a calm, rational conversation. They can continue to yell if they want. I won't necessarily be in the room any longer.
Yeah.
So that is the more typical boundary that we hear about. That's important as well, but it also has to be more internal boundaries to protect myself as well, not in an armored way, but in a way where I can still be a functional, whole, healthy human to be able to show up not only for myself, but for those around me.
Yeah. So boundaries versus walls.
Yes.
Which is, boundaries permeable. It allows for air to transfer between. I'm staying in what I will come back to referring to over and over again as being in my mature adult, being in that state of grounded presence. I'm listening. I'm able to hear what's going on. I can notice that my heartbeat is regulated, that the back of my neck is not tight, that I'm not stiff. I'm not defensive. I'm able to, just like when a child comes screaming, I'm able to come and be present with what's going on without going, oh my God, what's going on? Because if you're a parent, there's no space or time for that, right? I need to be present to be able to have all my senses to take in everything that's going on. So having that boundary is not having a wall. Having a wall, which is, my tendency, right? Because I lean towards more avoidant in the relationship. If there's a problem in the relationship, I'll be like, that's cool. I'll be over here. You can come see me in 3 days. I got patience, whatever. I mean, I'll catch up with you later. It's all good. Whenever you're ready, and the more that you come and, seek to find repair or seek to create connection, the more I'm like, yo, I need some time, man. Just give me some time, right? And recognizing how that can also be a way of walling off. Right? A boundary is simply saying this behavior, this specific thing that happened at this specific time, not who you are, is not okay with me. But hey, this thing that's happening right here, and my ability to stay calm with that in that moment, that's the real indicator. Right. But if you, what typically happens, right, is your, mine or yours, our protector comes on board and goes, no, you can't treat me like that. That's right. And mine goes, I'm not that guy. How dare you act like I'm the bad guy? I'm just telling you how it is. And then we go, you can't do this. This is embarrassing. And I go, I'm not the person who does that. Right. And so both of our protectors are talking to each other. Right. And so the adults are gone. The teenagers are present, and we're fighting not necessarily even with each other. We're fighting for safety from something that's happened a long time ago. And because it's so present in our physical body, we're just like, it's right in front of me. And that's literally the definition of a projection, that this thing feels like it's right in front of me right now, and I have to protect myself from it. And so looking at my boundary, and at the core of that, I come back to this idea of esteem. Do I hold myself in warm regard? Am I able to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. I see that's not working for you. Doesn't necessarily reflect on who I am or how I see myself. And I can agree to this. I can't agree with that, or whatever it may be. But when either I struggle with that sense of warm regard, then the direct reflection is I'm bad and I need to defend myself from that. Or the other side of it is is how dare you? I'm so much better than that.
Yeah.
Right. And so many of these things are insidious. I mean, they're literally baked into our culture and they become, of course.
And it's two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. Because the other element of that, as you're talking about the esteem and the way that we see ourselves, and from a more shame-based, it's like we're making ourselves bad. And from the more grandiose place, you are making the other person bad. And they're actually the same thing. Yeah. They're both coming from a place of contempt. Yeah. And it's either directed inward in the shame state, or it's directed outward in the grandiose state.
And how awful that is to be on the receiving side of both.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is often where I end up.
Right.
And then it's like double contempt, double shame. And then it's even harder to get out from under that. Yeah. But it's really important work. And the biggest antidote to that is self-compassion and pulling yourself up out of that state very actively and consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day as I was on my run. I was like, yeah, wow, that, it's so, there's a part of grandiosity that feels good.
Oh yeah. But sometimes when people come out of shame, they can actually shift into grandiosity, at least briefly, because they're finally in a place of power, and it does feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can shift into the moral high ground, like you did this to me, therefore I get to act this way. Now I'm justified in my righteous indignation. And it feels so good because the shame feels so bad. It's like being, when someone's bipolar, oftentimes the manic state feels really normal. It feels good. And I'm willing to accept the depression. That's not good, right? But the mania is like, no, that's normal. And I was really thinking about how challenging it is to be on the receiving side of myself saying I'm bad and my partner saying I'm bad. I didn't say that to you. I don't know why this is coming up here in this public interview where I should have said this to you previously. But really acknowledging, if you are that partner who is shame-based or oriented towards shame, and I want to be clear that this is not like a self.
This is movable.
This is very mutable. And it's just, this is where when my protector comes up, it's protecting me in this way. And how frequently and more often than not, I will choose a partner who has a tendency towards grandiosity. And it's got to feel so awful, like I'm beating myself up and this other person's beating me up, and they feel great. And, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there going, God, yeah, I've been through that.
Yeah. And, in my past 9-year relationship, while I still tended anxious and I think shame-based, if one of us was the more grandiose, I think he and I traded roles on that a lot more, where he would sometimes be it, sometimes I was it. Whereas in this relationship, it's much more common for you to be in the grandiose state and me to be in the shame, and we're shifting that. That's part of the work that we're actively doing.
And what's really interesting is for me, this is a protector from real strong shame early in my developmental stage, right? So we were really poor. I was the kid that people made fun of. I had long hair. Everybody thought I was a girl. I was dirty. You know, early on, and on top of all of that, I was biracial in the South in the early 80s. And, you know, that was not accepted. There were not very many other kids that looked like me. I was really a pariah in many ways. I mean, I think I had a really beautiful childhood, and my mom did a really amazing job. You know, she used to say, you know, whenever she saw a mixed kid, she's like, "There's a Kelly kid," right?
Oh,
you know, there's a Kelly
mom
kid.
is the best.
You know,
Our
and
moms are both the best.
well, yeah, and you know, but even those little shifts, like she was doing the very best that she could with what she had, and she did a great job.
Yeah.
But what I started to do was I started to early on protect myself from all of the shame that was surrounding me by creating these stories on how I was a little bit better than. You know, my first marriage was wrought with conflict because I never really thought that I was that intelligent. And so I went and married a computational neuroscientist at Caltech who had an undergraduate from Harvard, you know, and then went into that entire relationship trying to prove to her that I was smarter, right? Because underneath, I really had shame that I wasn't smart enough. You know, so if I could find this person who's super uber smart and then prove to them that I'm smarter by putting them down, by being grander and bigger than them, then I would have a better sense of self, because deep down, the grandiosity was masking the shame that I had. And I've done a lot of work on that, and, you know, but it's a game of whack-a-mole. You know, you think you got it over here. I worked through that in that last relationship. I'm over that, right? But that tendency, however small it is, still starts to appear in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, first of all of that. And for anyone who is in a relationship, get to know your partner's inner child. Get to know them because they need to be loved too. When you love your partner, you also need to love their inner child, and their inner child may not always be easy to love.
Yeah.
And for me, I had already done a lot of work around loving little Emily. For me, little Emily is like the 5-year-old. And I really, you know, early in this relationship, I really kind of got more of a handle on her. And she feels very loved by me most of the time. But then I came into contact with teenage Emily. And she ain't so cute. And I started to notice where there was literally a father-teenager dynamic playing out with us. We both noticed it. And that was a bit of a bitter pill for me to swallow, because I have always identified as like the strong, independent woman. And I'm like, what do you mean? But I could see it and I could feel it. And part of the work around the unconscious that I did around that was really tapping into her, that version of me, that 15-year-old who was pissed off that dad had left. And I was angry and didn't know why and didn't know what to do with it. And in a lot of ways, she's still angry. And she still has a hair trigger temper. And she also has the immense gift of reminding me where my boundaries are, where they should be, and where I'm not enforcing them. And I better wake the fuck up and smarten up and start enforcing them. And so these parts of us are incredibly valuable, and they have important roles to play. The difference is when you allow them to run the show.
Yeah.
And this is what I often talk about. I have built in practices myself where when I realized that little girl Emily, the 5-year-old, was running the show for a while in our relationship, I'm like, oh, girlfriend, no. So I wrote her a letter thanking her, honoring her. And then I burned the letter and I did a whole visualization practice about putting her in the back seat. Like, no, sweetheart, I'm driving now. I've got it. You're safe. Get in the car seat. You're okay. I've got it. And I still sometimes, of course, she still comes up sometimes, but it's teenage Emily I'm sometimes still reckoning with, and I'm sure will continue to. But there are gifts there. There are important pieces that they have to offer us. The other thing that I want to share too is you need to get to know when you are in your child state. And that can be easier said than done. But once you start paying attention to it, it gets very easy. You start to notice where you mentioned your neck gets tight. For me, my stomach clenches. It's going to be different for everybody. Maybe your jaw clenches. Maybe you clench your fists. Maybe you feel tightness in your chest. This can be a variety of different physical sensations, but you need to start reflecting on where that is showing up in your body, what the symptoms are, where it's showing up, and starting to dialogue with those parts of you. And then you start to notice it more in real time and go, okay, babe, I need 30 minutes. I need to go have a conversation with my inner 15-year-old and I'll be back.
Yeah. And that's holding a solid boundary. And also that can be tricky, right? Because if I say, hey, I'm out of here, then there's the abandonment.
There's a very specific way to do that.
Yeah. So we want to just say, hey, I got to take a moment. I'm going to be back here. I'm going to be back at this point in time. We can work through this. And so what I'm hearing is little Emily gets scared and she hides. Teenage Emily fights like nobody's business. And sometimes little Emily and teenage Emily show up at the same time. That can be really interesting, guys. Let me tell you. And both are, responses to shame and a pattern of seeking out connection to resolve that shame. And that's kind of also where we kind of get into some of the patterns we call codependency.
Yes.
Which is to resolve that sense of self. I need other esteem. I need to feel that sense of esteem from no better other than my partner. So I'm going to, if I act out and you pull away, I'm going to need to pull you back in to get back to center. Right. And so we see those patterns showing up, right? Assessing that pattern. And then of course, what happens with the more avoidant partner is when you reach out and go, hey, I need that. You're like, back up. No way. Nah, you've proved to me you're not safe. I'm going to walk away. And then that judgment gets reflected. More shame. And then I'm pulling away, right? And then
this is what happens, guys, between us, specifically us, as well as
you too.
Yes.
You know it does. Come on, let's be honest. But this happens with us, right?
Yes,
because we're human, just like everybody else, right? And so, I go in silo. I go, whether that silo is currently ice cream. In my past, it might have been marijuana.
Yeah.
It can be television. It can be work. It can be a host of behaviors that give me the space that I need. Meanwhile, you're sitting here going, I just want to repair. I want to repair. And I'm like, I don't know about that whole repair thing. I tried, I failed. No, I need a little bit of space. What I'm actually doing is I'm putting up a wall, and really acknowledging the wall doesn't always look like, back up. Sometimes the wall is just like, I'm not going to engage with this. And it's retriggering.
Yeah.
Starts to create, these same patterns. And I think one of the things that's been really challenging for me is to acknowledge where those small patterns are showing up, and how, if we're being relational, that we get to look at how both of us are a part of this dance. And it can be really tempting when you're sitting in my seat over here to be like, look, I said this behavior wasn't good. You did it again. I got to create some space. I'm not putting up with this. That's just a good boundary. And not even notice how that is subtly contributing to that one-up stance, as well as creating an avoidant pattern, walling off. Though, it's not always blatant, not always right in your face. It can be much more insidious and small. And that creates the dance. That's the dance that we get involved in. And it's difficult.
It is. It is challenging, sometimes more so than others. And even, I'm sure that we haven't talked about this, but I'm sure at some point we will go deeper into addiction and you sharing your story more around that and stuff like that. And the other piece of that for me on my side of that was looking at my patterns in terms of, well, how did I end up with someone facing addiction?
Mm-hmm.
And my side of that is codependency. And codependency and addiction usually go very closely hand in hand. It's another one of these polarities that tend to play out. And we won't go into all of that today. That's for a future episode. But the codependency piece is difficult to break. And, you know, I spoke to a really dear mentor of mine who has a lot of experience with addiction and codependency behaviors. And she had a really frank conversation with me about where are you avoiding saying certain things to try and maintain the illusion of safety. And I'm over here like, damn, do you know how many hard conversations we have? Like, I'm not hiding from shit over here. Are you kidding me right now? And she's like, you're still hiding. You're still hiding. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And so there's more opportunities, again, is what I'm saying. But really, it would have been very easy for me to look at you with great compassion in terms of what you were going through in terms of recovery and had been dealing with for so long, and say, oh, I feel for him. I'm here to support him. And that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And there's always something.
Yeah.
On both sides.
And I think this is the thing that I want to, you know, as we start to tie this together, to leave with is look at my own patterns. Look at the people that I've continually brought into my life. And it's not an accident. You know, it's not an accident. It is on a subconscious level what I am seeking to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And my subconscious is not necessarily as friendly as my conscious might be. My subconscious is primarily focused on protection and
familiarity, which may not be healthy.
Exactly.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good one, right?
Yes.
The familiarity.
The familiarity is where safety lives. And what's familiar may be utter fucking chaos. If that's what you're used to, and emotional unavailability and all of these things. So you have to, and this is why I think that sometimes a lot of coaching misses these elements. It's like we can rewrite the stories and do, you know, all the heady, very intellectual work. We can retrain ourselves a little bit, but are we actually rewiring for something new to come in?
Yeah.
And you have to rewire your nervous system to seek out what is unfamiliar, but find safety in that.
Yeah. Check this out, right? Familiar family. Familiar family. If it's familiar to your nervous system, to you, what you think you might be wanting, it's probably recreating something that already exists in your family system. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, it's recreating the things that you are looking to heal in your family systems that are yet unhealed so that I can become whole. That's it. So when we have those relationships, we're like, man, this person feels so familiar. Yes, they do, because they
we've got past life history and all this shit. And look, and I believe in that too. I do to a degree, but
let's get real. Let's get real on what it really is.
Yes.
Right? Is my subconscious trying to work through the healing that I know subconsciously I need, and that ain't easy.
And close that loop.
Absolutely.
Like we just keep trying to close the loop and we go from person to person. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the other reasons why grass isn't greener, guys.
No.
Grass is not greener. And look, I'm not saying that there are not relationships where it's healthier for both parties to go their separate ways. Absolutely. Look,
if you're not able to do the work of being in relationship, you got to go.
Yeah.
Like it, you know, if it's abusive, if you are literally at each other's throat and you're not willing to move through that because you're always pointing your finger at the other person, this ain't going to work.
Yeah.
And it can work
Yes.
It can't, even in those cases, it can work if I'm willing to stop pointing the finger at the other person and start looking at what I get to do in this relationship.
And doing some of that work, not just by yourself, but with the other.
Absolutely.
Again, I'm going to come back to that because we are just, there's so much of like, you have to do your own work. Yes. And.
Yeah.
It's the and. You still also need to do some of this work with your partner, which is why I love the work that you and I do, getting both of them in the room at the same time, and they both get to be supported by both of us.
Yeah.
And it's a really unique position to be in.
Yeah. I've said this before, but I think that, God is in this. Let's be real. Like there is some presence of some divine organization that is well beyond our understanding and awareness that has us choosing these partners that are bringing up this stuff. We had this moment when we first connected where we literally just locked eyes and started crying. And
We've
it was
never
like,
shared that, I don't think.
it was, I've never experienced anything. Like my body was convulsing. I was like, what in the world is going on?
And we stood there for half an hour,
And just
like 30 minutes.
like the energy of this is like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is familiar or unfamiliar in a way.
Yeah.
This is familiar. I mean, honestly, one of the closest experiences I could say to actually feeling the presence of God. Right. There is something divine in this right now.
Yeah.
And I can't turn my head away from this because this must be love. Right. And that I think is a soul contract.
Yeah, I think so too.
That is a contract of our souls saying, hey, you signed up for this in this lifetime. You want to be able to do this? Well, here you go. Here's the ultimate opportunity for you to learn and to grow. It ain't going to be easy. But if you are willing to take up the mantle, to really lean in and really look at what's coming up, not just for this other person, but for you individually and collectively, and create the pathway to joining our lives together in a way that really creates true harmony, then this is actually the pathway. This is the pathway to interdependence. And I think that that's what we're here for in this lifetime, is this find interdependence with all of life. And it starts with our primary relationships. And sometimes it's easier with our children because, they're perfect, but they're going to bring up our own triggers and our own stuff as well. But the real meat and potatoes, I think, is in relationship. And so the first place that we start is acknowledging, taking a look at what are the patterns? What am I inviting in? Isn't it interesting that this is my orientation? And with this orientation, it is very likely that I'm going to draw in somebody who has an opposing orientation. And in the first stages of our relationship, everything is going to feel like it's so familiar. It's loving. And there's maybe a yellow flag here and there, but there's no red flags. Everything just feels great. And then in the second stage, as that cocktail of chemicals starts to wear off and we start forgetting about that moment when we just felt so overwhelming a connection to this human being that I would never, ever, 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 ever let go of. Then we start getting real into what are our individual patterns. And those things can last for decades sometimes in relationship, but they don't have to.
They don't have to. And it's also really interesting to me that sometimes the very qualities that we so fell in love with in our partners end up over time also being the biggest things that piss us off the most.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the sort of disillusionment, power struggle stage. And I think that as you move through that, sure, some of those things might still piss you off, but you can also still appreciate them at the same time because you can see the polarity of it, the duality of it, the massive gray area that contains all of this beautiful mess.
Babe, I think this is therapeutic. You know what? I think this is better than going to our therapist, to be quite honest. Like we've worked through some things today that we've been needing to work through for a really long time. I think that we should keep doing this. I don't know about you.
I do too. And it is funny. I predicted, and I didn't even share this with you, but I predicted like to myself, I'm like, or I think I shared it with a friend. I'm like, I feel like this is therapeutic. This is going to be therapeutic for us.
Girl, don't lie.
And
You
then-
were like, we're going to be sharing in real time what we're actually dealing with. I don't
there
want
was
people
also
seeing
that.
that.
But then
when
that was
people share
because-
this, they've been through this for 30 years and they're sharing what happened in the past. I'm like, this could be interesting. We could just share in real time what we're going through.
That was because you suggested sharing in real time what we were going through. And I had a little bit of a panic attack because when you suggested it, we were in an especially difficult moment.
Yeah.
And I was like, having a vulnerability hangover preemptively.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, that feels really overwhelming. And yes, but I came around within the day.
Absolutely.
I would like to add.
Yeah, well, you did because, that's because you're anxious and I'm avoidant. No, I'm just joking. That's
No, it is not. It's because I know a good story and I feel very strongly about the power of vulnerability.
So this is what it's going to be, guys. We just talked about some things that we're working through currently, and some of the challenges that we're facing, and revealing the process so that you guys can see the process too, because it starts with awareness, but awareness is not enough, and so it really gets down to doing the actual work, and being seen and being witnessed. As you guys are witnessing us doing it right now, can be really healthy. And that's why we work with couples as a couple. That's why we're working more with couples as groups, because being seen in community, rewriting those patterns of what healthy community is. Because a lot of that shame, a lot of that grandiosity comes from the communities that we were raised in. The patterns that are baked into our system, and we get to rewrite those and recreate those. So come along with us on this journey.
And as our queen, Brene Brown, always says, sorry, my queen, not yours.
There we go. Speaking our language, woman.
As my queen, Brene Brown, always mentions, shame can't survive being spoken.
Ooh.
So when you get to be witnessed in it, when you can actually own it and be witnessed in it, there is nowhere else for that shame to continue living in your body. It has an opportunity, if you so choose to take it, to allow it to dissipate. And then you start to get to embody a whole new version of yourself, become more of yourself.
I'm going to embody your body.
I can't believe you just said
I don't even know what that means.
Guys, he has a weirdly corny side coming out today. I don't know what's going on right now. This side does not usually come out publicly, so you're getting like a particular flavor of him.
It's a new podcast. It's a new personality. Just you guys wait. On the next episode of Love and Practice.
I love you and all of your flavors.
I love you too. Oh, no, not you.
Come on.
Really?
There we go. Yeah, I'm secretly the corny one.
Secretly, that ain't a secret. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
If today's conversation brought up something for you, maybe you saw your own relationship and what we shared, that's not a coincidence.
The truth is, every relationship has its own map. But most of us are trying to navigate without knowing where we really are.
That's why we built the Relational Compass, to help you understand your direction in love. It reveals the patterns that cause conflict and the strengths that bring you back to connection.
It's based on years of coaching and real relationship work, including our own. And it's designed to give you insight, not judgment.
You can take it free at lipcouples.com/compass. It only takes about 5 minutes, and it might completely change how you see yourself and your partner.
Because the truth is, you don't need a new partner, you just need a new compass.
And a little practice.
Oh yeah. As always, that's what Love and Practice is all about.